Every Friday, it was the same thing. Just a late meeting, or drinks with the team. He'd toss it out like a passing comment, kiss my cheek without really seeing me, and head out the door like it was nothing. At first, I didn't think much of it. We'd both been busy. We'd both had long weeks. But after a while, something in me just shifted. The way he'd glance at his phone mid-sentence, the fresh shave, the cologne he only ever wore on special occasions. It started to feel less like routine and more like ritual. I didn't explode. I didn't even ask questions. I just started watching. Quietly. Taking mental notes the way you do when you're not quite ready for the truth, but you're already suspecting it's there, waiting for you. There's a certain kind of calm that comes before the storm, not the cinematic kind with yelling and slammed doors, but the eerie, measured kind. That's where I was. Calm, cold, focused. One Friday night, I followed him. No drama, no disguises. I just slipped into my car a few minutes after he left and trailed him, a street or two behind, lights off when I needed to. It didn't take long. He pulled up to a high-end restaurant, stepped out of the car, and there she was. Blonde, smiling, her hand already reaching for his. They walked in together like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't move. I just sat there, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel like it might ground me. Watching them through the glass, framed by candlelight and white linen. He leaned in, laughing at something she said. She touched his wrist. I think that's when it hit me. Not the betrayal itself, but how easy it seemed for him. Like it was routine. Like I'd already been replaced and I was just now catching up. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw open the door. That's not who I am. I just took out my phone, opened the Notes app, and typed in the reservation time. 7:30 p.m. Table for two, every Friday. I watched them clink wine glasses like it was their anniversary. I watched her laugh, a little too loudly, a little too freely. And I wondered how many lies it took to build something that looked that real. I stayed for 20 more minutes, just enough to burn the image into my memory, the way his shoulders relaxed around her, the way he smiled like he hadn't in years. Then I drove home in silence. No music, no tears, just this strange, hollow focus. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do. But deep down, something had already begun to take shape. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers. I replayed every Friday from the past 6 months. The excuses, the quick showers before he left, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. It all lined up now, but strangely, I didn't feel broken. I felt sharpened, like the pieces were rearranging themselves into something new. Not someone desperate to save a marriage, but someone who could see the board and finally knew how to play. The next morning, he kissed me on the forehead and said, "Sorry I got home late." I smiled. Not because I forgave him, but because I knew something he didn't. I knew what he was hiding, and I knew I wasn't going to be the quiet, clueless wife in the background anymore. I wasn't going to wait for the truth to explode. I was going to hand him the match when the time was right. He left to run errands, and I opened my laptop. If he could play this game, so could I. And I wouldn't need to yell or beg for closure. I'd be patient. I'd be precise. I'd be the storm he never saw coming. I didn't need a dramatic reveal. What I needed was information, and the right kind. So I hired someone, quietly. A woman recommended through a friend of a friend, who promised she could get me answers without raising a single eyebrow. She wasn't cheap, but I wasn't budgeting for betrayal. I sent her the restaurant's name, the night, and a blurry photo I'd snapped of the blonde at the door. Then I waited. A week later, the report came in, wrapped in a discreet email with the subject line, "Her name is Vanessa." Just that. Simple. But what followed hit harder than I expected. Vanessa wasn't some single woman living out a fantasy. She was married, to a man named James, a financial advisor, mid-40s, nice house, clean profile. I stared at the photos, at the side-by-sides of her with Ethan, And then her with James. Same smile, different life. I don't know why that part shook me. Maybe it was the hypocrisy. Maybe it was knowing I wasn't the only one being lied to, twisted into silence while someone else built their second life. But mostly, it was the opportunity. I wasn't alone in this story. There was someone else, someone who might understand exactly what I was feeling. And just like that, a new idea started to take root. I found James's social media without much effort. He wasn't flashy, just clean-cut, a dad-looking guy with a soft smile and photos of backyard barbecues and family vacations. There was something painfully honest about his face, something that made me pause. This wasn't a man who knew his wife was slipping out the door every Friday night in heels and lipstick. He looked like someone who believed in her. And that somehow made me angrier than anything. I sat with it for a day, thought about reaching out directly, but I knew how that would go. Too blunt, too chaotic. So instead, I sent him an anonymous message. No threats, no drama, just a single line. You deserve to know who your wife has Friday dinners with. I didn't sign it. I didn't include details, just enough to crack the surface. And then I waited. Again. There was a strange sense of calm in the waiting. Not peace exactly, but control. Like I had taken the first step out of a fog I didn't even know I was in. I wasn't just a wife left behind. I was a woman stepping into the fire on her own terms. And I had a feeling James would eventually step into it too. He didn't respond right away. I checked the account a dozen times that weekend, half expecting the message to bounce back or be ignored. But by Monday night, I saw it. Can we talk? No introduction, no panic, just those 3 words. I stared at the screen for a while, heart racing in that strange way when you realize the game has officially started. He knew, and now he wanted more. We agreed to meet in public, neutral territory. A small coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, the kind of place where people whisper and no one asks questions. When I walked in, I saw him instantly. Same eyes as the photos, but now they looked tired, wounded. I introduced myself, and for a moment, we just sat there in silence, both of us trying to make sense of this twisted overlap in our lives. He told me about Vanessa, how she'd been distant lately, distracted, how he'd chalked it up to stress or hormones or marriage things. I nodded through it all. I didn't need to tell him much. He already knew. But what I did say, I said slowly, clearly. I don't want to blow up their lives. I want them to watch. And when I said it, something in his face changed. The pain didn't disappear, but the confusion did. The second time we met, James brought a notebook. It was neat, structured, like he needed to make sense of the chaos on paper. I kind of respected that. We weren't friends, not yet. But we were connected now, tangled together in a story neither of us chose, and that created a strange kind of trust. We sat in his car, windows slightly cracked, rain tapping gently on the roof while we traded details like detectives on a case we didn't ask for. He was quieter than I expected, measured. But when I told him Ethan's routine, the reservations, the touches, the smug little glances, I saw his jaw tighten. There was pain there, but also something else. Curiosity. What if we didn't just expose them? I said. What if we gave them a taste of their own game? I expected him to shut it down. Instead, he nodded. That was the moment, the shift. We stopped being victims and started becoming co-conspirators. Not in some petty revenge fantasy, but in something far more elegant. Controlled, calculated. I suggested we book a table for the following Friday. Same restaurant, same time, just one table over. And for the first time since this mess began, James smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. We didn't rehearse anything. That was the beauty of it. There was no script, no fake story we had to memorize. We just needed to show up, sit down, and let them see us. That was the point. Not confrontation, not chaos, just presence. Undeniable, unavoidable. The restaurant, after all, was their little haven. their Friday night fairy tale, and we were about to write ourselves into the scene. I booked the reservation under my maiden name, table for two, 7:30 p.m., just like theirs. I picked a seat right beside their usual one. Not across, not diagonal, beside. Close enough to hear their wine order. Close enough to see the moment their expressions broke. And James? He didn't flinch. He simply said, "Let me know what I should wear." That was it. No questions, no hesitation, just quiet resolve. The days leading up to Friday were strangely calm. I went about my routine like nothing had changed. Groceries, laundry, replying to emails. But underneath it all was this hum, this electricity. I wasn't planning an explosion. I was crafting a moment, a mirror, one they couldn't look away from. Friday came faster than I expected. I stood in front of my closet for what felt like hours. Not because I didn't know what to wear, but because I knew exactly what I wanted to say without speaking a word. I chose something classic, polished, the kind of outfit that whispered confidence instead of shouting revenge. When James arrived to pick me up, he didn't say anything right away. Just looked at me and nodded like he understood the assignment. The drive was quiet, but not awkward. It was the kind of silence that felt mutual, charged, full of meaning. When we pulled into the valet, I saw Ethan's car already parked. Of course it was. He was always early when it came to her. I stepped out slowly, heels tapping against the pavement, James offering his arm without even needing to be asked. We walked in like a couple who had done this 100 times before. Relaxed, effortless, untouchable. The hostess led us to our table, right next to theirs, as planned. I didn't have to look to know they saw us. The air shifted. The weight of their attention fell across our shoulders. James sat down, folded his napkin, and smiled. I lifted my menu, heart calm, mind steady. Let them wonder. Let them squirm. If they wanted stolen glances over wine, they'd get a front-row view of what it feels like. From the moment we sat down, I felt it. The silence behind us. Not just the absence of sound, but the weight of it. Ethan didn't say a word. Vanessa, I imagine, froze mid-sentence. I could practically hear her fork pause in mid-air. But James and I? We settled in like we belonged there. I thanked the waiter, asked about the wine list, crossed my legs slowly, deliberately. It was a performance, yes, but it was also the first time I'd felt fully in control in months. The lighting was soft, golden, the kind that flatters everyone, even liars. I let my laughter come easily. Not fake, not forced, just light, like someone who wasn't waiting anymore. And James, bless him, leaned into the role without missing a beat. We talked about nothing and everything. Weekend plans, bad coffee, why the salad was overpriced. Meanwhile, behind me, I knew Ethan was unraveling, trying to figure out what version of me he was looking at. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. Their discomfort was so loud, it might as well have been playing through the speakers. I could feel the tension in the way Ethan shifted, in the sudden clinks of silverware and the way the waiter stumbled slightly as he refilled their glasses. We were close enough to touch, but worlds apart, and that was exactly the point. I finally allowed myself a glance, just one. Slow, deliberate, like I had all the time in the world. Ethan's face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might crack a molar. Vanessa looked worse. Her eyes darted between us, her napkin twisted in her lap like it might shield her from what was happening. She couldn't even fake a smile, not this time. Whatever story they'd built together, all the excuses, all the lies, it was folding in on itself, right there at the table. James caught my eye and gave the smallest nod. That was the cue. I reached for my wine glass, lifted it gently, and tilted my head toward their table without ever fully turning. My voice was calm, light, maybe even sweet. You're not the only ones who know how to enjoy a Friday night. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't loud, but it landed like a hammer. Ethan blinked like someone had slapped him. Vanessa went completely still. And then I turned back to my meal, as if I'd just commented on the weather. That was the beauty of it. No raised voices, no scenes, just truth, served cold and classy. I didn't need drama to make a point. The silence from their table said everything I needed to hear, And the best part? We hadn't even reached dessert yet. I could feel Ethan's stare burning into the back of my neck, but I never gave him the satisfaction of eye contact. I kept sipping my wine, laughing softly at something James said, though honestly, I barely heard the words. My pulse was steady, my hands relaxed. The control I felt in that moment was almost intoxicating. For the first time in so long, I wasn't reacting to him. I was leading the moment. I was writing it. The restaurant hummed with low conversation and the occasional clink of dishes, but our two tables existed in a different kind of silence. One confident, one crumbling. Vanessa had stopped eating altogether. Ethan's fork slipped off his plate at one point and clattered against the table. No one at their table moved to pick it up. I didn't smile. That would have been too much. Instead, I tilted my head just slightly, the kind of gesture that says, I see you. I see everything. Our toast wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I raised my glass, met James's eyes, and said, to honesty, in all its forms. He clinked his glass to mine, eyes calm, shoulders finally relaxed. And in that clink, soft, delicate, barely audible, I watched their entire table shatter. Ethan followed me out the second the check hit the table. I heard his chair scrape back and his hurried steps closing in, but I didn't turn around. Not at first. The night air was cool on my skin, grounding in a way that no apology ever could be. Claire, wait, he called out, breathless, like I owed him something. I kept walking. I wasn't running from him. I was walking away from everything he thought he could still control. He caught up just outside the valet. It's not what it looked like, he said. Classic. Like I hadn't just watched it unfold every Friday for weeks. Like the way he looked at her across the table had been anything less than intimate. I turned to him, finally, but not with tears or shouting. Just a calm he didn't expect. You don't get to rewrite the story now, I told him. And with that, I stepped into the car James had called for me, leaving Ethan standing there in his wrinkled ego. I didn't feel triumphant, not in the cinematic, slow-motion kind of way. But I felt done. Clean. Like the version of myself that had once waited up on the couch with a glass of wine and too much hope had finally packed her bags and left for good. Ethan didn't follow. He just stood there, hands on his hips, watching the car disappear, along with the last illusion he had any power over me. By Monday, Vanessa's world had started to unravel too. Word got out fast. Maybe James told someone. Maybe he didn't have to. Affairs have a way of leaking once the curtain's been pulled back. I heard she moved out a few days later. James didn't gloat, didn't vent. He just sent me a short message. Thank you for the truth. That was it. No need for more. Some things speak loudest in quiet sentences. I filed for divorce with everything I needed in hand. Screenshots, surveillance, reservation logs. He didn't fight back much. Maybe he knew better. Maybe he was still too stunned by how calmly it had all collapsed. I walked away with the house, the accounts, the freedom. And not because I played dirty, but because I played smart. That was always the difference between us. He lied with impulse. I planned with intent. I thought the satisfaction would come from watching him lose. But it didn't. It came from watching myself win, quietly, steadily, on my own terms. There's a power in reclaiming your story, especially after someone tried so hard to rewrite it without your consent. I wasn't just moving on, I was moving forward. James and I stayed in touch, not in the way people assumed, not romantically. Ours wasn't that kind of connection. We were survivors of the same wreck, both trying to make sense of the aftermath. Occasionally, we'd meet for coffee, send each other strange memes, or share updates like war veterans comparing scars. There was something comforting in that. No pressure, no expectations, just someone who understood what it meant to lose the ground beneath you and still find your footing. A few months later, I opened a consulting firm. Small, discreet. Focused on helping people navigate betrayal, not through vengeance, but through clarity. People came to me in pieces, and I helped them see their power again. Not by burning everything down, but by rebuilding from the ash. Funny how pain, when processed right, becomes a tool, something you can hand to someone else who's still stuck in the fire. They say revenge is sweet, but I disagree. What's sweet is peace. What's sweet is sleeping well, knowing you never lowered yourself to their level. You simply stepped out of their shadow. Ethan and Vanessa? I'm sure they'll remember that dinner for the rest of their lives. But me? I remember it as the night I stopped waiting to be chosen, and chose myself instead.